Hey everybody, Eric Renier here, and welcome to the 144th episode of the Writ Podcast. On Monday night, Canadians will be glued to their screens watching the election results come in, waiting for that dramatic moment when the networks make their call. But how do the networks make their call on election night? So to answer that, I'm joined by Meg Banks, senior producer, CBC News Elections, and someone I've worked with on many, many elections in the past. Meg, it's a lot of fun to have you on the podcast.
Oh, what a thrill for me.
So as I mentioned, I think we've done most provincial elections and certainly every federal election together since 2015,
A couple of
at least in
Americans, too.
some capacity. Yes, that's right, a couple of American elections. So now we're going to talk to and try to explain to everybody, especially what you do, even though I've always looked at it from the outside, I've always found it very fascinating. First of all, before we get into it, you should explain what is your role in particular.
Sure. So my job is to watch the election returns as they come in and to, at some point, say, okay, we're going to make a government call.
How long have you been doing this now? What was your
I
first one? Do you
made
remember?
Yeah, I do. It was New Brunswick in 2018, and I didn't actually make a call because it was darn near a tie. And then Brian Gallant came out and said, I'm going to try to stay on. And then it was
Yeah.
the election that lasted a few weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I remember that. I did that election. I was in Ottawa and there was a fire alarm that happened during the election and I had to leave the building while the
Perfect.
show kept going. All right.
Perfect.
So in general, like what you said, the CBC and other networks, all the other networks do the exact same kind of thing where they look at the results come in on election night, they make the calls in the ridings, and then they make the call for the election winner. The very basic question, the way to place to start is why? Why not just report the results and just, not say what's actually happening?
So, I mean, that's an option. But we make projections partially to give clarity to Canadians and partially so people can go to bed. Uh, so you don't have to wait for every single vote to be counted. It makes sense mathematically and journalistically to say at some point, okay, we've seen enough and here's what it is, so that the candidates can make their speeches while, frankly, Canadians are still awake. And then you have a sense of exactly what you're heading into with your government before you go to bed, and hopefully by the time you wake up. In some cases, by the time you wake up.
We also do the thing at like the local level, right? On election night, we always say there's project or leading or elected. Even there, why make the call at the riding level?
Yeah, I mean, similar thing. Like we do this for, I think we're the only broadcaster that does it for all the provinces and all the territories. And part of that for me has always been like it's a respect thing for the people who choose to run, so that they have a sense of clarity. But also, yeah, for the viewers and for the voters, yeah, to make a projection at every single spot allows Canadians to know what's going on.
I don't know if I want to get into it. Maybe we'll later. But we've had the cases where people have been elected or defeated, and then you have to go back on the call. Maybe we can talk about that after. That was
We
always
can
kind of
talk
fun.
about some kills.
All right. So where does it all start? Like, where does your job start? When's the first day that you are sitting down and doing something related to the calls, to the planning for election night?
What a great question. I start, I start it during an election year. I'll start a couple months out, just familiarizing myself with the writings. I have the same sort of spreadsheet, the same sort of process, the same document that I build for every election. And that's just, what the sea change was the redistribution, what was the vote share, what were the key writings last time. And I just get it all on paper and then I start memorizing. I try to memorize almost every writing and who holds it and some of the history, so that on election night, if it comes down to any of sort of those key writings, I can at a glance without having to be like, oh, let me check my notes. I sort of have got it on lock.
We should do a trivia
Oh, let's
test quiz
go.
on the point. So, and it isn't like there is obviously a larger team. Different networks obviously will have
Yep.
more resources and everything, and
Yes.
you have different size teams for provinces versus federal. But in the case of the federal election, what kind of team are we talking about here?
Yeah, for sure. So every so there's sort of two groups of people. There's the people who make the writing level call, as you suggested, and then there's people who make the government call. And so the decision desk is the group of people who make the writing level call. There's for a federal election, there's two supervisors at the CBC. So we have two people sign off on every call: a decision desk editor and a supervisor. And so when the editor says I'm ready to go, the supervisor looks at it and then says go. And so every editor has don't know, about a dozen, between like a dozen and 15 ridings. It's sort of staggered throughout the night, so you can have more than that in totality. And then at the government level, so that's however many that is. I should be better at math doing this job. And then
About 20 people or so, right?
sure. Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
right. And it's a split of people from CBC and from Radio Canada. And then on the government level call, there's two of us at the federal level, a representative from Radio Canada and myself, who are really like looking at the numbers, and that's our exclusive job on election night is running through them. But then we run our projection and our observations through a core group of people, and we say that everybody's seeing what we're seeing, and we make our we make the case for making the projection, and then we go.
Okay. All right. Now, from my perspective, I've never been one of the people doing the uh, one of the decision desk people. I've never done that. But I know that the people who work on that team, they, as you mentioned, they study their
Yep.
dozen or 20 ridings so that they know what to look for. And then the first interaction I usually have with the decision desk team is the projection meeting. And on our other on the numbers, Philippe and I have talked a bit about the projection meeting. But what is the rationale? What is the thinking behind the projection meeting?
Yeah, so the goal behind the projection meeting is to come to sort of a consensus of expectation. They're often wrong. We often say like don't base your pool on the projection meeting because we're often wrong. I was actually looking at our projections from 2021, and I think we were 30 off overall, which is like not bad. Um, and but yeah, it's the goal is we all come together. So people, reporters who work across the country, people in the parliamentary bureau, people like yourself, when you're on the show, you join the process. And we would go through every single writing as you've done on the show with Philippe, and we assign sort of a surety level and a party to each writing, and sometimes they're just pure tosses. So we'll toss in favor of the incumbent, but it's just a pick 'em. And so we have the purpose of that is to inform the decision desk. So if we have a set level of expectation and then we see things on the night, like one party picking up everybody's toss-ups, then, that starts to look like a good night for them. Likewise, if we see a party for whom we've said, okay, well, they're surely going to win X, Y, and Z, and then that night they're losing X, Y, and Z, we're going to slam the brakes on basically all of our projections and reassess because it seems like maybe the polls were wrong or we were wrong.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
And so yeah, we that's the purpose of the projection meeting is to come to sort of an agreed upon set of expectations so that we can move when things are aligned on election night. We can move quickly if our expectations are being met, or stop and halt if they're not.
And it also sets the expectations for the people making the riding level calls, right?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So, the surety level that we assign also assigns a set of parameters to that riding. So once those parameters have been met, our system will give the decision desk editor an elect prompt. Whether or not they choose to make that projection is entirely up to them, and sometimes they will wait long after the prompt is given, based on their knowledge of the riding, their knowledge of the candidates, what they've heard from locals, having gone to the ridings in some cases. Well, we've got a couple of like famous cases during the Ontario election in 2022. Haldeman, Norfolk, we were like, oh, it's a conservative whatever, and then a conservative sure, a PC sure, and but our decision desk editor knew that Bobby Ann Brady had a really good chance of winning, and so when the system, I think it was like one of the early returns or thing, we had programmed it as a conservative sure or whatever, and she waited and said nope, and then out she goes, Bobby Ann Brady in the lead, and she won. So
Yeah, I remember that. We didn't have a photo ready for her.
that's right. That's right. We had our brilliant graphics operator Allie during the show is grabbing a picture of Bobby Ann Brady and doing like the photoshopped edges and then putting it in the system like while we were live.
Yeah, so that's it. I didn't really realize that before. So like if we say that the riding was a sure, a certain amount of votes have to be counted before the person is even allowed to make the call. So it's not like in the United States where they call Kansas as soon as the polls close.
No, we don't do that. I mean, so like the US has exit polling and we don't really do that in Canada, obviously, but we also wait to see some vote being reported. And for me, that's also like a journalistic thing and also a respect for the voter thing, that we need to be able to see some vote counted before we'll make a projection.
Right. Okay. So you're not going to be calling, 25 ridings in Alberta just as soon as the polls close.
No, we got to see something counted. No.
Yeah. Okay.
We actually
That
never
makes
elect on
sense.
first result. That's one of our rules as well. So we like to
Okay.
see
Okay.
at least two polls reporting.
All right. And when the call is eventually made, it requires someone else to also sign off on it. So it's not
That's right.
just the person. So if it is a very close race, because I've seen sometimes the calls can wait for a very, very long time. And often it's because you don't have all the information, right? Because sometimes we're waiting to see if the last results coming in are the advance polls, and maybe it's a couple polling boxes with 2,000 votes in it.
Oh, yeah.
And while we have a good feeling that the riding's probably going to go one way or another, you still got to wait just to make sure.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We had a case in the 2017 Nova Scotia election. Sydney Whitney Pierre, I think our editor was Kat Tenney, who you'll know. She had that riding, and it was it the NDP out in front the entire night? And we have this graphic that we use internally that we've now made into an external graphic that tracks the vote share of the candidate as the polls are counted on like a little graph. And I think the NDP were out in the lead all night. And she said, no, no, like the Liberals have been sounding off about their advance vote, get out the vote effort. And we knew that the last box to be counted was the advance polls. And they often are because they're like the biggest boxes and the big chunk of votes, as you say, 2,000 votes or so. And like, boom, on that last poll, it flipped and the Liberals won. So yeah, we don't know, like we don't have, the John King, like, oh, this one poll in this one place, but we do often have, are the advance votes in? Are the mail-ins counted? Like that sort of vote we have. And that can force us to wait for a really long time.
Do you get that because you're in communications with Elections Canada or some of the local
Yeah.
scrutineers?
Yeah, that's right. So, Elections Canada or any elections jurisdiction, Elections Ontario, Elections BC, etc., they are in contact with the broadcasters through something called the Media Consortium. It's the Canadian Media Elections Consortium, or CMEC. The consortium hooks up with the elections body in the jurisdiction, and they feed CMEC a stream of vote count. And then it goes out to every single broadcaster all at the same time. So we have the exact same numbers as CTV and Global, and we all just make our own projections based on those. So it's not like the US where the vote counting is being done by a gazillion different people.
Okay, I'm going to get you in trouble here. Who is the best electoral authority to deal with?
Nope.
Okay, who's the worst?
Oh no! I will say, Elections Saskatchewan has a killer website.
Yes, I like the website.
Great website. Elections Ontario also has a really good website in terms of the way they put all their historic stuff up. A lot of elections bodies are like, oh, do you want to know how the vote went in 1930, whatever? Here's a PDF of a typewriter report,
Yeah.
like a scan, like here to go. Elections Ontario has like beautiful graphs. Oh, so lovely. Our data guy, Niall, who does our redistribution for us, he loved Elections BC's website because they put up a lot of CSVs and other files. So
Okay.
yeah,
This is suitably nerdy. I appreciate it.
excellent, excellent.
I like that Alberta and Prince Edward Island do give the polling by poll district results on election
Yes,
night.
on
So that
election
is
night. Yeah.
actually pretty good. So if we wanted to do a John King thing with PI, you could.
All
It
right.
could be like we're waiting for this to come in from northeast to Summerside, just north of the main street, whatever it would be. All right. So for the people who are on the decision desk, all right, you said they get their 12 ridings, their 12 or 20 ridings. What are they doing in preparation for election night?
So they each compile their dossiers. They study their histories, their candidates. They got to know who's running inside and out, what they've done. They call up reporters. They call up people who live in the riding. And then when it comes to the night itself, so we do a lot of rehearsals. We have like a whole rehearsal process. And so we run fake numbers that are like fairly realistic and that give them a sense of how the flow of votes will come in. But then when it comes to the night, so they have to know all of that stuff. And again, sort of like having it cold is better than having to stop and be like, let me check my notes. when it comes to the night itself, they have to like call their individual races. So on Monday, we'll have 343 individual races, but you also have to look at it in the broader context, right? Like, is there a wave happening? Is there something going on in this region or in this province or in the entire jurisdiction? And then you can start to, make your projections based on the broader context as well.
You mentioned the rehearsals, so I think I've done up to 5 on some. Often the number of rehearsals is related to how well things are going with the shows, and that's on my side. I won't let you comment on that. But what's interesting about you use the projection meeting to create, as you said, those realistic outcomes. So I've been in the past where whether let's say we thought it was going to be an NDP majority in BC, you would have a scenario that has an NDP minority just in case, one where they're really outperforming the polls, one where they're underperforming. And it's useful because it actually gets the people who are on camera to get their head around odd results.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. We take the projection meeting and we basically, like, here's the big secret. We take all the toss-ups and we just play with those. Sometimes we'll move the closes, and every once in a while we'll move a sure just to screw with people, but we mostly just move the toss-ups, and then whatever is possible by just moving the toss-ups around, that's what we'll build. So yeah, you're exactly right. For the BC election, I'm sure we built, a conservative NDP minority majority both times, and Greens with a certain number, and I'm sure we fake elected some independence as well during that election or during those rehearsals. We typically we used to do 5, now we do 4 because we like to do one really long one that sort of imitates how election night will go. But yeah, it's a chance for all the staff, technical, the decision desk, and then all the editorial staff to sort of practice, rehearse their lines. I know that you've said that once you get out of rehearsal, sometimes you forget, like on election night, you're like, who has won?
It gets in my head because
because
when people don't realize it, when we do the rehearsals, or when I've done them in the past, all the graphics are what you see on election night.
That's right.
So you see the numbers on the bottom of the screen with results that end up not being anywhere close to the result because they were the fake ones. But it starts to get into your head that, oh wait, maybe this party is going to do a lot better because that's one of the rehearsals we did, and it really screws up with me. So I'm not part of any of the CBC rehearsal this time. It's probably better for my psyche.
I want to know how CPAC does it. You'll have to report.
I'm very curious to find out as well. I don't know how authentic the fakes will be, but we'll see.
I often walk out of an election thinking, I can't, if you asked me what exactly the numbers were after Ontario, I would have to go look them up because I also get mixed up with the real numbers.
I know it's amazing because you visualize those numbers that you saw on the screen. So that's all these calls are being done at the riding level, and then when you get to the time to make the call, what's when do you start getting to the place where you're starting to get ready to make a call? And I know it's different on different election nights because I think it was 8:08 when it was called in Ontario.
That sounds right.
8 minutes after the polls close, and then other places on Monday night it'll be hours because we're not going to have results from west of Atlantic Canada until 2.5 hours after the polls close.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. 9:30 Eastern for Quebec through.
Through to Alberta. Okay, so when do you guys start sitting around being like, okay, we got to start getting ready to make the call? What's the first kind of thing that pops up that makes you think, okay, we're getting close?
Yeah, so I would say, so at a provincial level, maybe I'll just start there for a second and then I'll get to a federal. At a provincial level, when we start taking results really seriously is when we see a good number of votes in the system and reports from all across a province. So like in Ontario, for instance, if we're only seeing ridings reporting from the Ottawa area, I'm not going to call it a Liberal runaway. I'm going to need to see ridings reporting from all over the place in the last election that we just did in February. And when I say a good number of votes, I don't actually mean that many. In a place like Ontario, where you have 4-point-something million voters, a good number of votes is to start to make a characterization is only about 10,000. If a good poll is 1,000 people, then 10,000 is 10 times a good poll, especially if it's sort of evenly distributed across the regions. So that's when you can start to characterize. Of course, in the Ontario election, we had, I don't know, like 100,000 votes counted like that because of the tabulators, and it won't be the case federally. But yeah, federally, I mean, we'll place sort of due importance on the Atlantic ridings. Obviously, when you look at vote share in the Atlantic provinces, it's going to be super inflated for the Liberals, or we would anticipate if indeed election night reflects what the polls are showing us, and has been the case in the last few elections. The vote share doesn't tend to sort of even out into something that reflects what we have at the end of the night until we're well into the counting in Saskatchewan, Alberta, and BC. But one of the metrics that we use quite early on is the seat change. And so if we're seeing a lot of ridings change hands, or if we're seeing the governing party making gains, we walk in with our sort of set metrics of how many, based on a transposition of last vote and the by-elections, how many seats each party needs to gain in order to form majority government, and we're watching the seat change graphics for that.
So, like, you start with the prior, and then it kind of changes throughout the night, right? Because, going, like, if the election were tomorrow, you would start looking to see signs that the results are matching what the polls are saying, right? Like, that we would be headed towards a Liberal majority, or at least a Liberal win. But if you start to see signs in Newfoundland and then more signs in the Maritimes that it's not meeting projections or it's surpassing projections, then it'll change your prior. And then the next set of numbers come in. And so you're constantly kind of changing what you're looking for in the results as more come in.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I was watching the 93 election recently for fun. A classic. And the CBC called it for Chrétien while the Atlantic results were coming in, like that early. They called it for Chrétien. They said not a majority or a minority. And if you look on YouTube, the graphics are hilariously bad. But it's, they called the Liberal government as early as that. And so a lot of that is expectation about vote splitting or party share splitting. But yeah, if we're watching results come in Atlantic Canada, and as you say, the Conservatives are making gains in certain places, then we're going to be eagle-eyed on like the GTA and Southwestern Ontario and Northern Ontario and other places where they need to be making gains to form a government.
And what's the tipping point? When is it when you guys say, okay, let's go? It's party and this kind of government, like whether it's majority or minority?
So it's a lot of like, if this, like, so I wrote down some notes because I wanted to make sure I said all the things. So vote share is one of them. So we have like a historic benchmark for vote share, which is sort of interesting. It's a tool that we've used externally for a long time. So if you've watched CBC election nights, you'll be familiar with it. Federally, it's 38.5. That was a number achieved by Chrétien in 97 with his slim majority. So that is the smallest amount of share of vote that has been achieved by a party that then went on to form majority government, 38.5. Kind of irrelevant this election, or might be kind of irrelevant this election, but that is, so we'll be looking for, if somebody's in the 40s, that's going to be, so that's looking good for them. Okay. And of course, like I said, the Liberals will be inflated through Atlantic Canada. So what we'll also be looking at is the regional vote share trends. So what are they doing in Quebec? Are they mirroring the polls right now in Quebec? Are they mirroring the polls right now in Ontario? The seat change numbers. So after vote transposition and by-elections, vote transposition is my favorite words, my favorite phrase. The Liberals start the night, sort of notionally, at 154 ridings, and the Conservatives start the night notionally at 128. So the Conservatives need to gain 44. So that starts in Atlantic Canada. If they can pick up, a handful or whatever in Atlantic Canada, move into Quebec, maybe pick up a few there around the Quebec City region, move into Ontario, make gains in the GTA in the Southwest, Hamilton, Niagara in the North. Like if they can inch their way towards 44 seat gain, that's what we're looking for. And we'll see the Liberals inversely drop and the NDP drop as well. In the block. On the flip side, the Conservatives start at 154, so they need to gain 18. So we're looking
Liberals,
for that.
Yeah.
What did I say? Liberals, yeah. So that seat change number is what we need to, is one that we have our eye on basically the whole night. In the last election, we were able to project what was the last election? We were able to project Liberal government. we were able to project a Liberal government after the polls closed. I think it was actually just after the polls closed in BC. Although we didn't have very many votes from Saskatchewan, Alberta, or BC, but we were able to make that projection because we had a lot of ridings reporting in Quebec and Ontario, and the seat change graphic didn't have the Liberals on it, which meant they weren't losing anything and they weren't gaining anything. So that is status quo, and that's well on your way to a government if you've already got one. So yeah, seat change. Then we look at projections. So, like I said, we have our projection meeting, and if one party is scooping up everybody else's tosses, or even more so, their shares and closes, and they're holding their shares and closes, then we can start leaning in a direction. We look at key regions. So, if the Liberals are transforming block seats in the Greater Montreal area red, or if the Conservatives are transforming red seats in the GTA blue, like those sorts of key regions where things tend to go like brrr in a wave, then that's what we look for. I have more notes. The vote left to report. The vote left to report is huge, right? So this was, again, part of the reason why we were able to project a Liberal government without much of vote reporting in Saskatchewan, Alberta, or BC in the last election. So partially because of that seat change situation, but also because we were looking at the sort of sure ridings, the places that have elected Conservatives for many, many years, and are very likely to continue to do so. So we're not going to make a call in those individual ridings, but on the government level, I can look at them and say, okay, there's 40 of those left, but that doesn't get them to where the Liberals are right now. And then if all those things, if vote share, if seat change, if the projections are being met or a party is scooping up another party's tosses, if key regions are going in a certain direction, if the vote to come isn't enough to overcome a gap, and margins are wide enough. So if the winning party is winning most of their seats by margins that are bigger than a couple hundred votes, good, thumbs up. Like that is all stuff that gives you surety and can spur you on to making a faster call. On the flip side, if you've got a race, like BC in 2024, where the margins are all like itty bitty, then you're going to wait. You're going to put the brakes on and you're going to wait. So all those things, if.
I remember when we did Saskatchewan, we were waiting to make some of the final calls because there was a lot of ridings that the Sask party was leading in, and that if they held them, they would end up winning. But there was still enough unsure and close races that it could flip it over.
That's right.
So the government call, the party government call will come earlier because you'll be able to get that indication probably of who's going to end up winning. But unless it's like, will it be possible, do you think, to make a minority call before BC comes in?
It would have to be overwhelming, right? Like you would have to have a party doing like extraordinarily well in Atlantic
Canada. Already over
in
172 Quebec. Almost.
Yeah, or like quite close to it. You can imagine if they're at 165 and BC hasn't closed yet, you could probably find 5 seats in BC. But yeah, it would have to be pretty big to make that. Yeah.
Okay, what was the fastest federal call you've done?
I've only called one federal. This is only my second. Yeah, so this is my fourth federal election that I've worked on, but this is the second time I've called it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I don't know if you want to go here, but what happens when something goes wrong?
Yeah. Oh my God. Things go wrong all the time, Eric. Oh, wait. Do you mean like when we make a wrong call or when things go wrong with the evening? Because things don't go wrong with our calls all the time.
Yeah. No. Well, things go wrong with the evening. Sometimes the counts are weird and sometimes we've highlighted it. I remember in the Quebec election 2018, I was doing that show. And at one point an independent it was the what was the name of the party? It was like the National Advancement Party or non-affiliated. Doesn't matter. Was winning and it was on the board. And then when we looked at it, this person had the exact same name as the incumbent, and it had been a mix-up in the elections Quebec data, or at least what was coming into the system. So that kind of stuff happens. Yeah. But I'm talking about when something goes wrong with the decision desk.
Okay. Well, so things. Yeah. I mean, I have been across. So sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes we get it wrong. In the BC election in what was the last one? 2020. pandemic election.
Yeah, the one before that one.
The
Yeah.
one prior, yeah.
Yeah.
2020 pandemic election. West Vancouver, Sea to Sky, such and such.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the riding name. The Greens were bullish, and there was lots of, and their numbers were, the polling, and people were excited, and things were changing, and they were out in the lead for most of the night, and they had a good, comfy, couple hundred votes. I don't remember exactly how many. And we pulled the trigger, and we said, "Yep, go ahead. We're going to project there." And then the mail-ins happened. And the mail-ins favored the Liberals, and the Liberals won that riding. And so so the mail-ins were counted like 3 weeks later,
Yeah.
or whatever in BC. And so you just, you do a story about it, and you issue an apology, and that's what that is. But yeah, it's not great. We always prioritize being right over being first. And so that's the goal. Yeah, because it can really, like a candidate who thinks they've won. There was a great profile on the House of what happened in Chateauguay last election with because there was a recount that flipped the riding. And when a candidate thinks they've won, they start planning their life. They start moving into an office, and so it turned out to be incorrect. But in West Vancouver in 2020.
Yeah.
So yeah, but you never forget it. That's what happens, right? You never forget it.
That's what's funny. I mean, there's all the inside jibes and stuff about anybody who's had to do it's called a kill, right?
It's called a kill.
Yeah, when you made a call and you have to bring it back.
And in our results system, it's like a big the numbers tick along at the top, and there's like green and orange and like blue if it flips or gains or whatever, and then kill is black with white lettering, and it just stands out. It just sits there.
The good news is it's so memorable because it hasn't happened that often.
That's right. It's super rare. So yeah.
Okay. Speaking of super rare, this election now. Now, you follow things as closely as I do, so, we're not just we'll finish off with this, but it's not just about the decision desk. You are as engaged and interested in these elections as I am. So what are your big questions now? We got a week left to go. What are the things that you have no idea what's going to happen on election day? Or the things you're most curious about?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with the latest in the night. So I'm looking at a map of Canada right now. So BC. BC is a big question mark for me, right? 13 New Democrat ridings, 6 of them on the island. What happens to that vote? So how good is their ground game? Can they keep incumbents like they did in Ontario, right? And if not, where does it go? Some ridings, you can sort of glance at them and say, okay, that's a blue-orange, and some you can glance at them and say that's a red-orange. But there could be funny splits in some places. So BC is I'm going to be just salivating, waiting for the election, waiting for the results at 10 p.m. on election night in BC. But yeah, I mean, one of the other questions for me is 38-42 is wild in terms of vote share. So 38 Conservative, 42 Liberal, or whatever.
Okay, right. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I haven't looked at the poll tracker this morning, so it might be slightly different. But I just think it's so interesting. So I mean, 38 is a number that would get you a government in most elections.
Yeah. At the beginning of the year, if I told you the Conservatives are going to get 38% of the vote, you'd be like, oh, well, then they won. It was just a question of whether they got the majority or not.
That's right. I would never imagine. The last time a party hit 40% was, I don't know, 2000 or something. And maybe even before that. But yeah, it's just, so my big question is how soft is the Liberal support? Is it, does any of it move back to the Bloc? Does any of it move back to the NDP? Is that sort of a real number? And where will 38 is a good solid number, and where could that play out, and where could splits happen? So yeah, those are my big questions, which encompasses like a whole most of the country, frankly. So.
It's got to be one of the most interesting elections. Like, just speaking personally, and I'm sure you'll agree, we did not predict this at all. We were expecting that this would be a pretty obvious election result, almost, that it was going to be a dull. I thought I was going to be talking for these 5 weeks about does the NDP finish second? Do the Liberals survive? Would have been the interesting aspect of it. But instead, we got this election where it's going to be whole different regions of the country that are going to be voting in ways they haven't in decades in some cases. It is just a really fascinating election. And it's always fun to be part of those.
Oh yeah, super interesting. Like one of my study documents that I started preparing at the end of last year was like, oh, what's the most ridings the Conservative Party has ever won? What's the like biggest share, right? And
Hmm.
so I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna need that, but like yeah, the amount of change in the I mean in the polls and in the race has just been remarkable. And the fact that we're, looking at what is effectively a two-party race in Canada is like the whole game has changed. It's super fascinating.
Yeah, it's going to be a really fascinating night. So it's going to be fun for the decision desk people, or nightmare. It could be one of those in terms of how unpredictable the night will be. But I'm sure it'll go very well with you and your team. You guys know what you're doing. So thanks a
Thanks,
lot,
Eric.
Meg. I always love chatting with you during elections, and it's fun to be able to have you on the podcast. So appreciate you can make some time for me.
Oh, real pleasure. Thanks so much, Eric. I'm a huge fan. Subscriber to the Writ, devour all your stuff. So yeah, real thrill for me.